Oopsie. Hello, bird nerds, and more specifically, plant nerds. It's nice to see you. This is going to be a regular thing that we do, and I'm hoping this time works. So, if you're here, obviously it's an okay time. I'm wondering whether maybe I can. I will repeat these, but maybe there will be a better time. Um, I just don't know. Saturday morning. I think I picked a dumb day though because referendum here. Everyone's going to be out getting a democracy sausage and and participating in democracy. Hello, Martin. Good to see you. Now, Martin, just for everybody, could you please type in, let everyone know where you're from, and I'll pop that up. Um, right. So, habitat gardening. I want to explain to you just before we kick off how I want to do this to make it more useful for you. Obviously, it's difficult when you're doing like a live stream and I'm sitting at a desk inside um, to do what gardening shows and things like that do, which is demonstrating potting and all that kind of stuff. Um, maybe maybe in the future I'll be able to do things. I think I've worked out a way to be able to set the stream up outside and maybe do some things like potting and pruning demonstrations. But I'm not sure if that's what what you need. And look, if you're a regular with the bird emergency, you know that I'm far more interested in doing things that are interesting, not interesting, useful, and have some sort of value for you to implement either at home or in a workplace or influencing friends, and particularly when we're talking about conservation, introducing people and projects. And forgive me while I'm looking away. I just want to make sure I don't forget some of the things that I wanted to bring up today. This morning, I want to do a brief introduction on what you need to consider before you even stick a spade in the ground or or start making your sketch or making your list of plants to buy. None of the really fun things that we like to do with gardening are the things you need to do first. So we'll get there in a minute. But see that bird behind me? If you're a bird nerd, you will be aware that that is the Swift Parrot. Now, the Swift Parrot one was voted the most popular, the Australian Bird of the Year in a biannual competition readers' survey, I guess is probably the best way to describe it, by the Guardian newspaper in Australia. And there was a big push on to make sure that the Swift Parrot won in an effort to raise awareness of the plight of the Swift Parrot. There are estimated to be about 300 remaining individuals remaining in the wild. And that's substantially down from the 1,000 or so that only a few years ago was the estimated wild population. Now, 300, there's an argument that it's already functionally extinct in the wild. It's not an easy bird to domesticate, so there isn't um, as far as I'm aware, a captive population, insurance population. So anyway, I wanted to just bring into gardening today some of the things that anyone who lives within the Swift Parrot range could perhaps do uh, to assist in some way. But we'll get to that in just a minute. I might do that as the kickoff. But first, I want to explain how I want to run habitat gardening so that it becomes useful. So we'll have our discussion and our live interaction, and I'll be asking people to submit questions or, yeah, really questions, or maybe areas that they need some advice or some help with. I'm more than happy to attack pest and disease problems, but you can't just type in my plant has has brown leaves and I don't know what's wrong with it. If you want to do that, you have to take some photos, maybe a little video clip, show me the situation of the plant, things like how long have you had it, how do you water it, what did you feed it with, things like that, so that I can have a good stab if it's got discoloration or some kind of deformities of the leaves. Take photos, send them to me, and I will put my knowledge as a horticulturist to use and see if I can solve some of those issues, offer some advice. Hopefully it's a matter of cultivation awareness. Maybe you can just change the way you do things to make your plants more healthier, or maybe we need to do something, offer a suggestion of something better, or anyway. So that's how I want to approach these things. I will prepare briefly a sort of topic for the day, but I want it to be largely led by what you would like me to cover. What I'm thinking of doing is things like maybe 10 best red flowering plants for Southwest Australia, 10 plants for small birds in Darwin. I've got a notebook full of different topics, so we'll take it that way. But a lot of what how I will approach things is by trying to tie it in with what is available for you to implement easily, and to tie in with products and plants that I see when I go out to visit nurseries, which I'm going to be doing regularly from now on, and taking the camera with me and doing little clips and things in the nurseries and also in some public gardens. And we've got a bit of a long-term plan that we will take this on the road, tied in with some of the other things that we do with the bird emergency and some of the people that I've been working with the bird emergency to do some kind of events in different locations. So anyway, so that's a bit of a long-winded thing. What I plan to make available every Sunday or Monday following the show is to have a sort of fact sheet that you can download. The way to do that will be to just fill in a form, telling me your name and your address, so that then, no, not your address, your email address. I don't want your address. I never want your address. So that I can, gives me time to prepare, to just summarise if there was anything that we talked about in the show that wasn't in my sort of initial rundown, and where I will make some recommendations of species and things like that. That will be free, but there'll also be an option for, if you want more detailed sort of worksheet or guide, depending on what we talked about, that I'll have an option to get hold of those through. Still tossing up. I'm testing them both. Either a Patreon or the Buy Me a Coffee or the Substack. I'm actually got all of them. I'm uploading all old episodes and creating new things from all of those. So anyway, it'll be a little bit fluid, but the place to find out everything, as I'm sure if you listen and watch, check the socials, thebirdemergency.com/live is where I kind of put the little interesting bits. Yeah. So let's talk about the Swift Parrot just briefly. Martin, are you aware of... No, I'm just looking at the map. The Swift Parrot doesn't turn up in your neck of the woods in Gladstone. So, sorry, you're not going to get much out of this first portion of the show. But the Swift Parrot, if you're not aware of it, is a parrot that breeds in Tasmania, and the island state to the south of the mainland of Australia. It breeds in the summertime, and it breeds in the eastern and southern parts. And there's only 300 left, so it's very very limited. But some of the islands and some of the places that the 40 spotted pardalote, which is another critically endangered species, frequent, are swift parrot habitat. And the swift parrot is a hollow nesting bird, and it's migratory in the sense that after breeding, it flies up over Bass Strait into or onto the mainland of Australia, but then it's described as being nomadic, and it follows eucalyptus blossom. So wherever there's feed, if there's food there, it will go there. So that means autumn and winter, late winter, it needs flowering eucalypts for not only for nectar, but also those insects called lerp and psyllids, because it has a diet where it also will eat those. So some of the sort of ugly eucalypts that are susceptible to insect attack are really important. Now, the swift parrot has been known to disperse into southeast South Australia and as far north as areas around Brisbane. But the main concentration is in what we call the box woodlands and the forests of eastern Australia. But one of the places that they're regularly seen in Melbourne is in the grounds of La Trobe University. And La Trobe University now has some very mature eucalyptus species, Citriodora particularly, that are notable, but a range of other eucalypts that are flowering at the right time. And that's where the swift parrot often turns up. So a lot of people have got photographs there. Golf courses are another thing, another place. But the swift parrot is not, even though it's often seen with more common lorikeets, like the rainbow lorikeet and the musk lorikeet, it's not like the rainbow lorikeet in its habit, in that the rainbow lorikeet, if you put nectar out and you've got small flowering, suitable flowering plants, that they'll come down and feed at a low level. The swift parrot won't do that. The swift parrot is a canopy feeder, and it's rarely seen in other places. So if we were to do something to assist swift parrots in the mainland, what would we plant? And the plants that it prefers are very large eucalypts that flower in late autumn, winter, and leading into the very early spring. And the two that are most often noted as being its main food sources are Eucalyptus ovata, which is the swamp gum, and Eucalyptus globulus, which is the Tasmanian blue gum. The Tasmanian blue gum is widely used in plantations in Victoria and I'm assuming in New South Wales as well. Oh, and also in the southwest of Victoria and southeastern South Australia. So that may well be a very significant food tree. So what happens to plantations after 30 years or 40 years? They all get felled, okay? So it's quite possible that in those areas, private landholders could supplement for those times where the mature food stock, those plantation timbers, are harvested, that there could be a reservoir of food. Now, obviously, for 300 birds, it doesn't need to be hundreds of stems per hectare. So, but competition with rainbow lorikeets would be intense, I would imagine. So to be helpful, you really need to be able to plant large trees, maybe one on a block or whatnot, but maybe the most significant thing you can do to assist the Swift Parrot as a home gardener is write to your Minister for Conservation in your state and local government, um, uh, your council, and of course the federal minister, who really is the key to ensuring survival, and tell them that this is an important issue for you and that native forest logging should be ended, and particularly in Tasmania, that those areas where the hollows, the trees that bear the hollows that the swift parrot requires to breed, as well as having food, must be protected. And that's something that you want done immediately, not phased in, because there's only 300 of them left and phasing in might not take that long. Seriously, I don't really think there's much that the home gardener can do to assist the swift parrot. But I do think that government bodies, like people managing highways and nature strips and public parks, areas like golf courses, I think they can be planted with suitable trees, the swamp gum, Tasmanian blue gum, Eucalyptus ovata, Eucalyptus globulus, and I've seen swift parrots feeding in Eucalyptus citriodora and Eucalyptus maculata, which is a lemon-scented gum. And actually, they're not eucalyptus anymore; they're corymbia. But let's just call them eucalypts. Let's just call them gum trees, and the spotted gum. I'm sure there's others. I was looking before to make a list, but I think most of it is fairly anecdotal. So I think we just can say tall eucalypts that flower in late autumn, winter, and early spring are in the southeast corner of Australia are important food trees. Public lands they can maintain or they can develop a food source for them. But hey, what's the point if there's nowhere for them to breed? So anyway, that's it. Talking about the swift parrot. Let's talk. What I wanted to do is that even before we get to site analysis, which is the term for measuring up and checking that you've got a hilly slope and all those kind of things in your own garden. Well, here we go. G'day, Chris. How are you? They feed in yellow box trees around Greensboro. Yes. Now, they are birds that they're widely known. I mean, their historical range has included the box woodlands of southeastern Australia, and that habitat has, been radically reduced. So I don't want anyone to take away that those two eucalypts are the only ones that that can be used. If there are canopies, so if there are parklands with trees that are able to develop a canopy, and this is where golf courses are really good because often they interlink and the birds can confidently move through a patch. Look, I think if the birds were common, they'd probably be observed feeding at the tops of large melaleucas and things. I imagine that they would be quite happy to get into those food sources. But there's only 300 of them, so it's going to be very rare to see them. And if they can find their preferred feed, they're going to enjoy them. Interestingly enough, Chris, I'm sure the birds that are hanging out in Greensboro are also the ones hanging out in Bundoora at La Trobe University. Infrequently, swift parrots get seen in the city of Melbourne, again in mature Eucalyptus citriodoras. I've heard of them. They've been recorded in Melbourne University, I think. I don't know. But I just wanted to make use of the swift parrot as a bit of an emblem, since it won the award or won the poll. It's not an award of any sense. And I guess I'll make the comment too that I didn't really jump full steam ahead and go crazy pushing the poll this year, because everyone was saying we're going to raise awareness for the Swift Parrot. But then I did see, I'm not sure which one of the cartoonists made the point. I don't think people need to be made aware of the plight of the Swift Parrot. I think they just need one person in Canberra to decide to do something. It's actually, we need to end native forest logging. And it's not only for the Swift Parrot. There are, countless species that would benefit immediately from that. Chris, I've got the little ticker going on the bottom. Great, you've commented or asked a question. That's great. But are you based, Chris, in the northeastern suburbs of Melbourne? Let me know. Greensborough being northy, quite more northy. And so just let me know, and we'll go from there. Okay, site analysis is the second step that we need to get to, and I'll start talking about site analysis next week. But if you've been thinking, I want to make my garden more wildlife friendly, habitat garden for want of a better term, you need to become really familiar with the conditions that you have, and most people are only generally aware. So we're going to talk about compaction. How compacted is the soil that you have in your site? Is it widely traversed, or by dogs, children, yourself? Have you used it in the past as somewhere where you parked cars or caravans or boats, or any of those things? And there's one way to find out if your site is compacted. You can just take a garden fork, and if you have to lean heavily onto your garden fork to really force it into the ground, you have compacted soil. That's a pretty simple test. So if you've got compacted soil, you need to be doing some kind of remediation before you even start buying plants. But the other thing you need to, because compaction will really influence. Here we go. Chris, great. Okay, Chris, you're in Kinglake West. Okay. That's interesting, Chris. Probably not next week, the week after. I'm going to be talking about plants that are suitable in an area that is often under threat of bushfire, and Kinglake West certainly is one of those. Chris, have you got the orangey brown soil, or have you got the grey soil at your place? It's so hard to talk about soils, but in a live stream. But compaction generally is a problem of the heavier soils that have a greater clay content, and the orangey browny soils that happen in some parts of that part of the Great Dividing Range near Kinglake often get easily compacted when they're wet if they have a high clay content. Now, why is compaction an issue? It's because it affects the amount of infiltration that light watering, and any watering, but you only really want to be doing light watering if possible, so you don't get lots of runoff and erosion. And if you've got heavily compacted soil, you could put maybe a couple of buckets of water or watering cans worth of water on an area, even if you've got it well mulched, but it will run off rather than infiltrate into the root zone, which means that your plants then have to have nearly all of their feeder roots right in the very top 3-4 centimetres. And of course, that's the part of the soil that dries out first. So if you've got compacted soils, and again, the test for that. Oh, hello. Hello, YouTube. Hello, Facebook. If you've got compacted soils, you need to take some remedial action before you put plants into them. So that's one test. The other thing you need to be roughly aware of is how much sunlight do the different parts of your yard, and it's going to be different if you're in a small, like I'm in a unit, and there are parts which get a lot of sun and they have brick wall near them and they get very hot, but there's at the other ends very limited amounts of sun, and but in summer they're nice and warm, but in winter they're sort of dank and dark. Great. Okay. Okay, Chris. So you're on good. So you're on some acreage. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. So the orange brown soil has got a heavy clay content, which is really useful for water retention, which lets you choose different kinds of plants. That's great. So where was I? Yeah. So thinking about how much sun each part of your garden or your acreage, or your unit really get, and it sounds obvious, but I want to drum it into you. You need to be aware of it in all of the seasons of the year, and really be honest with yourself about how much direct sunlight, how much indirect sunlight the area gets, and then how much partial shade and deep shade that an area gets. Because in my experience working in horticulture, particularly in retail, I've mentioned a lot on the show, but for you to know, after I did my horticulture study, I worked at Bunnings, I worked for Yates, Australia, and I worked in some production nurseries where we were, potting up thousands and thousands of plants, growing them on, and then distributing them out to, like the major retailers, those climbers and those azaleas and cyclamens and stuff that you see on special in Coles and Woolies. Yep, that's the kind of thing I used to do. Also sending out to the large garden centres. And when I was at Yates, I used to be visiting growers and retail nurseries selling those products, and also sometimes doing demonstrations and things like that at retail nurseries. So I'm pretty aware of what goes on out there. So anyway, when I was after I did that, I opened up my own little nursery, and that was in a very rural place and quite remote. And those plants that needed that could thrive in that area were quite specialised. And often what I found, this is getting back to where I was going with that about sunlight and everything, often people would come into the nursery, or if I did an event at another major nursery when I was working for Yates, people would bring in a plant or clippings of a plant or something and say, what's wrong with this plant? And what they usually want is to be able to be sold some potion, some miraculous thing that will fix the plant. But more often than not, it was just the wrong plant for that spot. Often it was too shady, so just not enough filtered sun or full sun to survive. And plants are slow growing often, so it might take a year for a plant to die, or it might take 2 years for a plant to die, or to really show signs that it's not healthy if it's put in the wrong spot. And the other thing that often got was people who had planted something required a part shade, and it would be plopped out either in full sun or in an area where it gets lots of reflected radiant heat, like a side wall, or reflected off glass on a patio or something like that. They're not a problem that you can fix with anything other than putting a different plant there or moving the plant to a more suitable spot. And the next thing that I often got, and again, there's nothing you can fix if a plant that needs a heavy soil was put in a light soil. Those scientific terms. Soils that retain a lot of water can be slow to drain, or soils that you can apply water and water runs straight through and it's not held in the root zone. They're very different types of plants, and if you put the wrong one in the wrong spot, there's no special potion that you can do. Maybe you can use some water retention crystals or something like that, or you can dig out a lot of soil and put a different type of soil in there. But from my point of view, I like to be a bit non-interventionist, and this is why I like front-ending the process. Know the plot of land, know the location, know the spot, and then either cultivate in a way that will allow you to grow successfully plants you want, if you have particular plants in mind, or the way I prefer to approach it is just pick the right plant for the right spot. And if you do that, more often than not, with very little ongoing maintenance, you can have a happy plant. Let me ask Martin and Chris, since you're using the comments section, which is what I like. If you're new to me, I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. I'm also a plant nerd, and I like being a plant nerd a lot. Chris and Martin, let me know what you are wanting to get out of these sessions so that I can make it more interesting. Are you looking for plant recommendations? Have you got problems that you need to solve? Are you just looking for ideas? Do you just like getting up on a Saturday morning and having a coffee with me? That's fine. I'm happy with that. And we'll go from there. Do you have any challenges in your spot? Chris, if you're on a former potato farm, I wonder if you've got residual fertilizers that are still sitting in the soil there. I wonder what the runoff situation is like. Where does water collect? That's another thing in analysing your site. You need to look at what your site is like in a period where you have not had rain. So does your soil get hard? Does it crust up? If you put a little bit of water on the soil after a long dry period, does it just beat up and run off, or does it infiltrate? Because water, some soils can become hydrophobic, which means they repel water rather than suck water in after a period of long dry. Compaction can also do that too. Now, if your soil is hydrophobic and you go and spend $300 at the nursery and come home, dig some holes, I will do a video on how to dig a hole to plant a plant too. That's often not done well. But if you've got hydrophobic soil and you pop a plant in that's in this beautiful potting media, this beautiful plant come from the nursery, it's been watered to the optimum way, and then you pop it in some hydrophobic soil and you're spraying water around it, either a couple of things can happen. Either no water infiltrates and it will suffer the effects of not getting any water. Or if you are filling up that planting hole with water and the rest of the area is hydrophobic, often you just create a well. And then in extremely dry soil, your plant can effectively drown from inundation. And so these are problems that I see a lot where people have not prepared the soil. So yeah, tell me, Martin and Chris, that question I just put to you. What are you wanting to get out of those sessions so that I can make them more useful? So the other thing, or one of the other things with site analysis, or just thinking about the site before we even measure it out or anything like that, is how close is or how much do you have a variation from the high spot to the low spot? Because that's, unless it's quite dramatic, it's usually underappreciated, and a natural fall means you can make really good use of the water that you apply. And water, I believe, is going to be far more critical in gardening in the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Plants have a long life, obviously. And if we haven't had restrictions in this part of the world for quite a while, but I believe that nationwide, and I think worldwide, things like applying water in copious quantities to gardens will be far less frequent. Martin, in a unit, case of one side full of sun in summer, almost full shade in winter. Okay, Martin, that's kind of like what I'm at my place. So, with that in mind, let's extend your situation a little bit more, Martin. Does that mean? I mean, you're up in central Queensland, so you don't get a twilight like we do here in Melbourne. When you get that, so the twilight here means that there are places where you're still getting partial sun, not full sun, for a couple of hours a day, which can be enough for some plants. Anyway, again, what buildings you've got in the way and all that affects that. But Martin, are you saying that you have places that you would like to use that in summer are blazing hot, but then in winter get very little direct sunlight? And in a unit, is it like a balcony, a patio, or do you have a small, if you're on the ground floor, do you have a small yard? Let me know that. I'm curious about that. Pots, I'll pop your comment up again. You're really able to use large pots. That's a real opportunity from how my mind works, Martin. And also think, I want to expand your mind a little bit without using psychedelics. Use a combination of pots, because you can, some plants that adapt really well to large pots are not great for putting some other plants in. Some plants like little small pots. The other thing too, with the arrangement of pots and using pot stands and things, mean you can really alter the habitat, the micro habitat for those plants and pots, and means you can be really creative too. So 2 small courtyards. All right. Right. So I've got an idea of what you're looking at, Martin. What do you want to do with these 2 small courtyards? And I'm guessing that you look out to one of them from the kitchen, and perhaps a different one for a living area. So Are you just wanting to see? And you've got to, I guess these are multi-purpose areas. You've got to have some utility, maybe hanging out clothes, or maybe you've got a little sitting area in one of them. Um, give us an idea. Actually, if you want, if you've got time, go and snap a couple of photos and email them to me, and I'll see if I can bring them in, and we can have a bit of a chat about it. But I'm really interested in what you want to achieve uh, in these courtyards, um, uh, and yeah, I mean, do you want to be able to watch birds come in? Do you want to encourage frogs? I mean, um, do you need shade in that summer period? I mean, again, there's always that choice about if you need shade in summer, but you don't want it in winter. Well, then you need to be looking at maybe some deciduous trees, and that will affect um, uh, what you select. Um, Sometimes there's that rigid thought that we need to use indigenous plants and and native plants, but sometimes in a in an altered environment, in an urban environment, we can't always do that if we've got a site that demands something a little bit extra. Um, and Chris, on your paddocks, in your paddocks, are you running livestock or something? Have you got maybe some um, house farm animals that you have to take account of, um, dogs and whatnot as well. Okay, so the kitchen you're looking out of one, and lounge room on the other. Okay, um, uh, okay. So you want to encourage birds, insects, and have spotted monitor. That's pretty impressive. So. Uh, The other question I've got for you, Martin, getting the monitor in, that's really impressive. Does the monitor have to climb fences or come through a fence, or do you back onto some sort of open space? All these things are the kind, and I was going to talk about, and that's a good point, Martin, that getting to know your patch, you have to think beyond your fence, beyond your property line, because what is around you should influence what you do, but you also have to think about what will happen if the land use around you changes as well. So I know it's a bit complicated sometimes, but that's true. Hello, newcomers on Facebook. Let us know in the comments, because if you can do that, just let me know where you're listening or watching from, and what we've just been talking about. We're talking with Martin a little bit at the moment about his case study in his place, small courtyards. Chris has also let us know that he's got really, really lovely, deep, rich soil in northeast of Melbourne, on a former potato farm. So we'll just get to know each other's spots while we talk about those issues of knowing your site. Run When I talked about water infiltration on your soil before, there's also the related issue of drainage. And this, again, is something that people really discount when they are just casually looking at their own garden. And I guess what I'm talking about this morning too is not a major landscaping situation where you just dig everything out and you design a whole new garden. That's a different ball game. I guess what we're talking about now is just this adding to what you've got, or taking some things out that may be a bit deleterious or not giving you what you want, but not changing the whole overall fabric of your existing place. If you're able to do a wholesale clear out and completely alter a space to your own needs, that's really that's an opportunity, but it's also really expensive, and that's not the starting point I want to go for here. As we develop, I will be bringing people on who are landscape architects, landscape contractors, and we might talk about some of those issues, because I would get really frustrated when I watch gardening shows where in a 5-minute segment they show a complete renovation and they just don't really talk about the pitfalls, because hey, the pitfalls and the problems that people come up against don't help you sell stuff at the next weekend. And making mistakes, especially with drainage, are so expensive and can be catastrophic, and can also lead you to have conflict with neighbours. So where does your water come from? Not the water that when you turn on the tap and the hose and you put it on your garden yourself. Not that water. Where does the water that naturally gets into your plot, where does it come from? Does most of it come from the sky? Or does a lot of it come from runoff and seepage? Not surface runoff, but just infiltration through the soil profile from gravity from roundabout. Think about that, because that also affects what you can or should plant. And is it likely to change? And that brings me to another point too. So it's so complicated to talk about these things just blithely and blindly without seeing the spot. Which is why I'm going to be really flexible about how this works, because I want to be guided more by you about what you want and need. This is why it's fraught doing sort of question and answers on live radio and stuff, and why they don't do shows like that on TV, and it's very limited even now in any horticulture talkback, because it's very hard to give a good opinion to something that isn't really obvious, and you can't. But this forum does allow us to extend. We're not limited to 15 minutes on a Saturday morning. So you need to also be aware that if your garden is shady, because in neighbouring properties there are very large trees, in the current state of affairs in urban Australia, I have recounted on the Bird Emergency many times how my street has changed so much, because properties get sold and the first thing people do now is remove large vegetation. And in fact, most of them come in and remove every stick of vegetation. So if you are relying on shade from trees that are not on your property, is it likely that those trees will disappear? And if they do, you maybe need to be selecting plants that can deal with full sun or more sun than you currently get. Martin, okay, what have we got here? Martin backs onto a hill that is eucalypt habitat, okay. Quite a bit of life. It's an opportunity to plant the right type of plants, mainly for birds, especially the sunbird. Okay, good. And other small birds, large pots, small pots, flowering and fruiting seasons. All right, so let me see if I've got that right, Martin. Where you are, you have natural habitat, for want of a better term, but sort of suitable wildlife habitat in your neighbourhood. You've got sunbirds, which is great. Maybe they'll be building nests off your overhanging eaves or something as time goes on. So the important thing for you, if you want birds in your garden and other animals in your garden, um, is to make sure that you've got suitable plants flowering or providing food opportunities right through the year. Now, the sunbird is a resident bird in your area. I think it's not moving around. Um, Long flowering and fruiting seasons are important. Uh, Martin, in your situation, do you have locally, and this is like in your area, maybe your neighbours, other houses you've noticed, if you've got a park nearby, are you noticing any seed-eating birds? Have you got any finches, parrots visiting? Are they around? Um, and and similarly with the fruit, are you getting pigeons, doves in the local area? Because sometimes this is another thing that I often came across when I had my nursery is people would often want to attract birds that just aren't nearby, and uh, so I mean I did have people come back after maybe 3 years and they'd say, um, "You sold me this to attract this, and I'm not finding them." And I'm thinking, yeah, well, I did tell you at the time that they're not nearby. It's unlikely that they're going to miraculously discover that you've got this lovely fruiting plant where there are no fruit eating pigeons nearby. Anyway, by the way, my cocky mug. I'm working on too, just as an aside. Over the next month or so, I'm hoping that there's going to be some bird emergency merch hit the shelves, for one of the great shelves in the cyberspace, which will be available in the same places that the guides are. So we've covered some of the rudimentary things, Martin. Since you're doing the back and forward with me at the moment, we'll keep going. What are your neighbours? If you're in a unit, I'm guessing you are in a unit with a number of similar dwellings, and perhaps in the street, maybe similar dwellings. Have you got? Do your neighbours have gardens that are that are attracting wildlife, or are you in a situation where, for instance, if you planted something that I'm thinking that corellas might discover and become very noisy, would that be a problem for you as well? Okay, what have you got? Okay, so you've got finches. Well, that's great. If you've got finches, tell me which ones you're getting in there. Lorikeets, honeyeaters, fig birds, magpies, forest kingfisher. Have you had a forest kingfisher in your yard? Leaden flycatcher, grey fantail, and more. Okay, well, that sounds like you have, quite dense, not dense as in rainforest, but very good vegetation cover in your public spaces around you. That's a really good mix to have. Be interested which finches you're getting, and are they resident? Because that again makes you can make some of your plant selection decisions based on if they're visiting or not, and if they're visitors, and if you can work out, which we can do, when they're likely to be in your area, well, that's when you need plants to be flowering. Again, if your finches are visiting in summer, it's not much use having autumn flowering or seeds ripening when they're not there. So, yeah, if they're residents or not. That's a great list, Martin. be great if you sent me some photos. Oh, that reminds me, Martin, you did email me, didn't you? Let me check. I've been super busy this week trying to get some things at the back end done here. It takes a lot of time to upload and download things. Let's have a look. Martin, I know you did email me. I'm just going to... I get thousands of emails, by the way. Most of them are not amazing. Where's your... I know I here we go, Martin. Oh, good. You sent me the palm cockatoo article. Yes, and the Indian miner trapping. Okay, that's right. That's what I wanted to... Okay, thank you for that, Martin. I had seen the palm cockatoo. Oh, hello. Let's see. Sorry. Okay. Gee, it's all Facebook today. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Maybe we'll just do Facebook only or something for a couple of sessions. Hello to the new folks popping in on Facebook. Do tell us where you are watching and listening from, because then we can sort of scope the discussion a little bit towards you. At the moment, I'm talking with Martin because he's popping lots of information into the comments, and he's in central Queensland, which is quite different to me. But I do love the area where Martin lives. I really love the Botanic Gardens near you, Martin, at Gladstone. I really, really love the way they use the eucalypts and the open. They're not large open lawns like in the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne, for instance. Obviously, smaller space, but the way they've used those eucalypts and open space for people to just enjoy walking around. It's a terrific garden, really successful, I think. So, Martin, forest kingfisher living around your place, so it's great. So you often see it in the power line, so it's great. Spice finch and chestnut-breasted manakins, okay. Yeah, well, they're opportunistic. Okay, so your neighbours aren't really encouraging birds as their first stop. Oh, g'day, Neil. Neil is on the other side of the country. I'm assuming you're in Perth today, Neil, and not in the outback somewhere, relying on dodgy telecommunications. Come back to you, Martin. The chestnut-breasted manakins. I think the spice finch would probably be resident if they had the opportunity to be. They do like to join the flocks of the chestnut-breasted manakin. A great bird, the chestnut-breasted manakin. You don't have any of the other finches. The crimsons could probably be around your place, couldn't they? Are they? Let me see if I'm fooling myself. I think there's some southern crimson finch. And I've seen crimson finches in lots of photos in gardens. Crimson finch distribution. Let me have a look at that. Oh, yeah, there's as far, yeah, recorded as far down as Gladstone by the look of it. Oh, maybe that's Rocky. Pretty close though. Anyway, oh, who's giving us the Facebook love today? Oh, Neil. Sorry, I already looked. Sorry. Neil, since you're here, tell us about your garden location. And while Martin's really keeping me going with the comments. Yeah, double bars. Yeah, certainly I would have thought you would have double bars if the area was suitable. Um, yeah, but start with mannequins. Start with mannequins. Um, oh, Martin, too. Have you got an idea of the area of each your of your courtyards? And please don't do a Donald Trump. Where 11,000 becomes 33,000. Uh, can you believe that plonker? Um, Amazing. Um, Nuclear secrets with Anthony Pratt. Unbelievable. Anyway, no politics today. Um, yeah, Martin, how big roughly are we talking? And um, give me an idea of the other uses that each of your courtyard has to perform. Like you've got to hang out your clothes, I'm guessing, dry your clothes. Um, uh, where do you where do you put your bins? Things like that. They're often the major things. And have you got a shed or something that is also taking up space? Because of course, how large the square footage, the um, square meterage of your area doesn't tell the whole story, because you have space that you can't impinge on, because you need to open shed doors, or you need to wheel your wheelie bins in, and they have to sit somewhere, and you need to be able to stand in front of them and put stuff in. So often your usable space is a lot less than you think, but you can make up for that if you've got a fence. You can use things like the half pots, trellises. You can now hanging gardens are a thing too. Depending on the money available to you for those kind of installations, you can use so many great plants. Okay, vertical garden might be a really good solution for you, Martin. I'm hoping you will send me some photos, and we can maybe come up with some ideas for your spot. Um, are you If you're getting really hot, does that mean that you're sort of northwest facing in the hot uh, in the hot courtyard? And is your hot courtyard your front one or your back one? Let me know that. Um, Let me know that. Let me know that. Also too. Let me know. This is something I probably should do little surveys before. I might start doing that. I might start putting that on the live page, a link to a little quick survey. What would you rate your gardening expertise? Would you say total beginner, or you're okay, or you're pretty good? Um, what sort of success do you have when you purchase plants? That's really the measure, isn't it? Because if you are out purchasing like half a dozen plants and only one of them survives, that's a pretty expensive hobby. I can't believe the price of plants. Um, so yeah, that's it. There's two questions today. What would you rate your skill level as a gardener? And the other thing, would you be interested in growing your own plants? Um, would you get joy out of that? I'm not talking about growing hundreds and thousands of plants, because that's not what we're on about today. But maybe if you saw something that you really like for years, I wanted, being in on the southern extremity of Victoria, I wanted to grow a waratah and get it to flower. And I eventually got both a red waratah and a white waratah to flower after about 3 years of very judicious and careful pruning. But I eventually got a waratah flower head. For years, I had not had waratah, not been able to get a waratah to flower, and it wasn't until I worked out why and stopped repeating the same problem that I got the success. But and now we're really spoiled. There's so many great cultivars of different plants out there that can fit a particular purpose that you have, and achieve virtually anything you want. All right. Now I'm not going to keep going on and on and on today. I will have available for download. Oh, hello Twitch. It's nice when Twitch comes in on the tail end. For those of you who if you haven't already told us whereabouts you're watching or listening from in the live audience, let us know so we can try and refer specifically to your space. Martin's given me all the answers I asked for today. What I am interested in is what you want to get out of these sessions. They will be regular, and I may add a different time as well, so that, because of course Saturday mornings, if you got kids doing school sports or local sport, or Saturdays is like your regular shopping morning or something, it's going to be difficult to do this time. I just thought that it would be a good time before people might head out to visit their local nursery and to get some ideas before they go out. In the next few weeks, I'm visiting some garden centres and nurseries in my area, and look, over time I'll probably try and scope out some in other cities. But what I'm going to do is just get an idea of what is out there, what's available, what kind of plants are commonly available in my area, and I can assume that that's going to be pretty common because there's national buying chains and everything nowadays. That the products and the particularly things like pots and accessories and things are all going to be pretty standard across the metropolitan areas in Australia. But we want to extend this to be other countries and take some inspiration from what other countries are doing. I know every time I go to Kuala Lumpur, I'm amazed at how good some of the urban horticulture is in KL for a tropical climate. And then I go to some other places and I'm amazed at how bad it is. It's either a cultural or an economic thing. A lot of places don't value those common public places like streetscapes in the way that some other countries do. Okay. Martin again is telling us about his courtyard. Summer is hot. The front is hot in summer, but shady in winter. And okay. So what's your aspect, Martin? Okay, Martin. Martin's telling us he will be potting some plants today. It's easy to spend lots of money on plants. I mean, they've become very expensive. I reckon if you looked at the inflation on plants over 10 years, it might really surprise. Do you really need a native potting mix? I've never used it on natives. Okay, the short answer for that is, Martin, if you are using grevilleas, banksias, Dryandras, anything in that Proteaceae family, and this also is for any proteas and leucodendrons, any of those related plants. Yes, you do, and it's got nothing to do with the actual potting mix. You can, and look, I will also say, you can use a cheap budget potting mix, but not the cheapest. They're usually absolute rubbish because of the materials in them. Buying a good potting mix is really, really good using containers for sure. But the main thing is that plants in the Proteaceae family, most notably in Australia, grevilleas and banksias, but all of the other allied families, Dryandra, they are susceptible to phosphorus. They actually have special roots that are super efficient at dragging phosphorus out of the sandy soils where they usually live. And they're sandy, free draining, not water retention, not good at water retention. So phosphorus, you can easily get phosphorus toxicity if you use a potting mix which is designed for instance, vegetables or roses or azaleas, rhododendrons, because there'll be lots of phosphorus in there, and you will your Proteaceae plants will cark it. And allied to that, a lot of Australian native plants, because so much of Australia's soil is ancient in geological terms, that it's been leached over the years. And we also don't have, for so much of Australia, we don't have that really dense vegetation cover, and the soil is dry. The leaf litter is dry. It's not spongy and rich and mossy and gloriously moist and full of rapidly cycling nutrients with this really busy micro flora. The bacteria and the fungus and the insects that are churning it over, like wet environments in especially the northern hemisphere, or East Asia, where a lot of these plants like rhododendrons and azaleas have evolved. They also are very nutrient hungry, and they need regular applications of fertiliser things. So a lot of the plants that are adapted to Australian soils are very efficient at removing the nutrients they need from a depleted soil. That's why so many of them, like melaleucas and callistemons and others in the Myrtaceae family, like eucalypts, often react really well to fertilising, but it's so easy to go overboard. Short answer, if you're using natives, yes, I would recommend using the native potting mix. And if you're thinking about buying any fertiliser, there's only two things I would recommend for any of them: is a slow release native fertiliser, and some of them now are actually designed for general native plants. Some are particularly mentioned for grevilleas, banksias, whatnot. Slow release in the prill form, the little granules. If your budget stretches to it, buy the more expensive one. I can tell you they are better. And the other fertiliser that I have used is a soluble, usually fish-based. But the problem with these are they're often really there's often other problems associated with the manufacturing and the collecting fish and whatnot, which is that I'm far less comfortable with that nowadays than I was, 10, 15 years ago. Charlie Carp and Maxi Crop are two that I have had success with, but I'm far less comfortable with the other issues around using an animal product as a fertilizer. Yeah, but if you dilute them and apply them, they can be successful. I used to use them more as when I bought plants from a nursery, and often you'll buy plants, especially if it's a like a specialist nursery that is run for love rather than profit. You'll often find fantastic specimens of plants, but when you get them home and you have a look, they're really dry. They might be pot bound. I would then pop them in a really weak mix of a soluble fertilizer in a bucket so that it gets totally soaked up. Then I would, if they're pot bound, I would do a root prune, and that's another episode where I'll actually demonstrate that. We'll do that live one morning. I just have to go and buy some root bound plants and show you how to properly prune them. Because if you don't fix the roots, they'll often just again die a very slow death as the roots just go round and round and strangle the whole plant instead of growing out. That's a whole different story. Yeah. So often that's a good way to do it. And sometimes if you've got if you do have a soil that takes a long time for water to drain, and these clay soils are often an example of this, I would often mix up a weak soluble fertilizer mix and fill the hole up, and then let that drain away. That way, you know that when you do put a plant in, and then you plant your potted plant into that hole, and you then water it, you know that the water is going to move through the soil profile and out into the surrounding soil, and that needs to occur for the initial roots that your potted plant grows when it's in the hole. The little micro roots, the feeder roots, they need to be able to follow that water, the path of that water into the soil, to then begin becoming established. I probably need to do some diagrams and all this. But again, we'll find out what you all want me to cover and what you want to know over time. And I should note, I'm not looking to replace other garden shows and things like that. I think where a forum like this can be useful is often, again, there's a 3 or 5 minute segment on on TV shows, and they show beautiful pictures and they tell you what to do, but they often don't step through how to do it. So if you don't already know how to do it, or you haven't tried it before, I can sort of tell you some of the things that I've learned or that I've seen. The best way to learn in horticulture is to watch mistakes other people have made, so you don't have to make them yourself, because stuff's expensive. I really understand that. Martin, you mentioned here that you use sea sole for a little boost. Yeah, sea sole, Maxi Crop, Charlie Carp, they're all very similar. They're not identical, but they are similar. Another one which is very common in the nursery trade is Aquasol, which is a powder or moist granules that you can mix up. Aquasol's really good if you've got these things in the shed, and you're unsure. Really dilute them a lot. It's actually I can tell you what I did used to use sea sole, maxi crop, Charlie carp, whatever I would have, I would often use them as a foliar feed. Um, so again, you really dilute it. So take the recommended rate and halve it, or even halve it again, and then I would put it in. Those there's the little spray adapters. You can put a reservoir on your hose and spray it out. That I used to use those um, if I thought the plants were looking a little bit undernourished, and that often happens especially in sandy soils. And you can give a bit of a foliar feed and then apply some granules, which are longer, slow release, maybe 12. That might be 6 to 12 week sort of feeding program. Especially if I knew that the plants had been flowering, and then want to go through the process of seed production. Producing capsules and things like that on woody capsules after your flowers is really intensive on the resources of a plant. So, yeah, there we go. So, yeah, Martin, with all of those fertilizers are very effective. The other thing I guess I would note about all of those fertilizers are you're better to use less than the recommended rate and use it more often than to think, oh, well, it says half a teaspoon. I'll put 2 teaspoons in, it'll be twice as good. More often than not, it is actually twice as deadly. You're unlikely to have a toxicity issue if you are very, very sparing with the fertilizer. The other thing too about native plants, in Australian native plants, they often don't need virtually any feeding. If you've selected the right plant for the area, it's usually only to get them established. Once they are established and you're seeing lots of nice new growth, and some native plants grow amazingly rapidly if they're happy with their situation. You need to worry more about correct pruning or things like that than any of the other husbandry cultivation techniques that are involved. We get a bit brainwashed into what we need to do for plants just because there's a massive industry around selling stuff for plants. The critical thing is the right selection, the right preparation for where the plant is going, if it needs preparation. And in preparation, I'm going to include technique, dig the hole twice as wide and twice as deep as you think you need. If possible, sometimes you aren't able to do that, and then you make do. That's really the thought. Any other? Have I covered that adequately for you, Martin, and for the others of you here who are not asking questions? I'm still really interested, Chris, if you're listening still, if you're not out doing something in the yard. Hello, YouTube. Nice of you to jump in. We are just really covering we've just been covering some of the issues about what fertilizers to select. Martin's in central Queensland. We're talking about native plants in most cases. When I'm using native, I'm really talking about the idea of Australian native plants, bearing in mind that native can mean for the region, indigenous is another term. But I'm being quite broad here. My interest is in conveying a plant that will be suitably successful for whatever purpose you want it to do in the location you're in. So, opportunity, tell me where you are, what situation you might be in, and if there's any particular problem that you have in your locality. I think I'll only keep going for about another 10 minutes because I I just don't want to just keep blabbing on. I only want to tell you stuff that will be useful. Again, I remind you that tomorrow, if you check back on the birdemergency.com/live page, I will have put under this segment, and this will then go. This will be down in the past live streams tomorrow because it will be past. It will be there will be a download for basically the key points that we've talked about today, and some of the plants we've mentioned. I'll have to obviously make a much different guide for fertiliser use, I think. Potting mix selection and fertiliser use. I'll just do some key points in there so you can download it and take that with you for the next time you go to the nursery. And I might actually put some recommendations in based on what is... So I don't even know whether they've changed any of the brands or anything like that. They always change the different names every time a company gets sold. They just repackage and rename the products. Martin, I have always thought that the Debco native mix, and there is also another brand, I think it's a West Australian or South Australian potting mix company, that has a native one which is really good, but I'm really torn about the damage that how the sands are harvested to be used in some potting mixes, how damaging they can be depending on where they come from. So in a lot of cases, a completely soilless media is preferable, and that's generally from composted wood materials, is preferable. But I'll get some people on to talk about potting mix, whether they can come live or whether I have to record something. But we'll actually talk to people from those companies about their production and things, and then we'll talk more about the cultural actual using them in the garden or in the pots. Martin, another question for you before we head off. Have you already purchased pots? Have you got lots of pots full of dead plants that you're wanting to replace, or are you now approaching this that you will be looking to buy some pots and come up with some ideas for plants in them, and creating garden beds out of pots? That's how I like to think about it. And you can, some of the climbers can be used, ground covers can be used in this way, where you can have them going in a pot, and then as they grow, you can put you can use them like a ground cover in a normal situation, just by encourage them to grow over the tops of other pots, so that can actually reduce the direct sun hitting your pots and reduce how hot the pots get, because that's often a really big problem too, especially if you're using black plastic pots, or indeed any of the earthenware, stoneware, terracotta pots. If they get really hot at night, during the day, they often stay hot during the night, so it's often better to have something reflecting or absorbing the heat. Okay, well, I think that's about all I wanted to get to today. I really wanted to just introduce you to how I want to do the shows. So I will promote a sort of broad topic for each one, but then I really want the question and answer to be the main part of the show. And if you have questions, comments, or problems that you would like me to look into, or if you want me to help you with some plant selection and give some suggestions as we go along, send me some info early before we go live, and I will talk about it. Now, I did promise that on Twitter, I did mention Deb was talking about grass wrens and all their names and and whatnot. Here we are, of the grass wrens and the striated grass wren. I wanted to let Deb know that the striated grass wren had a revision, and they're in the Meluridae, the which is the same family as the fairy wrens and whatnot. There was a revision in 2020 of the striated grass wren, and the complex, because they're very variable and specialised. Now, I wasn't able to get all of the article, Deb, if you are watching. I am looking into it a bit more, and will but the simple answer to what we were talking about is so many of the names of grass wrens are quite new, because they were local subspecies in the past, so they were just called either striated grass wren or one of the other names for little local groups. But they're continually being split out because they've been so isolated for so long, and they're now being attributed local names and given specific names. So unless you got a very new bird book, they often won't be in them. So, okay, Martin, just come back to what you said. So you've purchased some rootstock. Now, purchase some rootstock. Does that mean that you purchase some plants and you're going to try some grafting? That's generally what I would think about with rootstock. You're going to have to explain that for me. Oh, would you be interested in knowing how to graft things like grevilleas, or maybe trying out some something I'm really keen to try out is grafting of Banksias, so that maybe you get 3 different flowering Banksias on the one rootstock. Would you be interested in that kind of stuff? I'm wanting to give it a go. I'm really keen to try out my idea on some Banksias. Okay. All right, Martin, just young plants. Okay, I would call them like either seedlings or just often a lot of the plants that we buy from nurseries are not seedlings, but they're cutting. They're from cutting stock. So yeah, okay. Now we're using the same terminology. I know what you mean. Yeah. All right. Well, that's about where I'm going to leave it. I've got to get ready to go and vote. Feeling very disappointed that I don't think the country is going to show itself as a really mature country just yet today, but we will see. Quite disappointing. Martin, good luck with the courtyard. If you want me to give some more ideas, just take some photos so I can get an idea, and let me know which direction is which, and maybe take some photos from outside showing the front of the property so I can get an idea of how you're situated in the streetscape and the locality more generally. I might have a look at Google Earth or something too and see what. Sometimes if you look at Google Earth, you can see where there's natural vegetation, connected links, and you can see what might be possibly visiting you. But yeah, anyway, that's a whole different story. Let's concentrate on getting the right things in your pots and putting them in the right place, getting some healthy plants growing. How long have you been in your unit, Martin? I'm not sure. Oh, good. We got people on all the platforms too. Now, I can't tell if anyone's watching on Twitter/X. If you are and you want to be involved, if you want to ask questions and comment, swap over to one of the other platforms. YouTube, thebirdemergency.com/YouTube. Facebook, thebirdemergency.com/Facebook. Twitch, thebirdemergency.com/Twitch. And I also do stream if people are, just in case anyone is looking at my profile on LinkedIn, I'm also streaming there. 4 years, Martin. Okay, well, 4 years is a long time in container gardening with pots and whatnot. So yeah, we'll get onto that. I'd be really interested in how tall you are able to have your plants. Do you have upstairs neighbours too? That's the other thing I would like to know about your place before I'm venturing too many more suggestions. Okay, folks. Next Saturday. Next Saturday, maybe I'll start with. Let's start with some fruiting plants. Start with that, Martin. Since you mentioned them, I will come up with a list of plants that produce fruits that I think are really good for many locations. And until we've got people joining us from many other parts of the world, I will keep it fairly Australian. But the general principles that we talk about in gardening for wildlife. Okay, I think we might always. I'll probably always be going over some of those general principles that wildlife need in your garden, and one is access to water. I think we'll always talk about that, access to water and shelter if they feel threatened. But I'll try and talk about examples of what I'm talking about that relate to the plants that we are, or the situations that we're reviewing in each episode. So next week at 9:30 a.m. Saturday morning, Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Does that make it, Martin? It means it's an hour earlier for you, isn't it? Because you're not on daylight time, you're on standard time, aren't you still? So yeah. And if you've got any suggestions for what you would like me to raise, talk about, maybe plan an episode around, or if you've got pest disease, other problems, other concerns, let me know. I did put those new emails together. Submit at thebirdemergency.com or submission at thebirdemergency.com. That way I know they're not just general correspondence. So get that over there. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Neil. All the way. It must have been very early over in Perth when Neil must be getting ready to go out into the field, perhaps. There is a Bird Emergency episode featuring Neil Hamilton. Look that up. The Ghost Bird featuring Neil Hamilton. Go and have a listen. I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. I do produce the Bird Emergency podcast. There is new episodes on the way, and we're streaming This Is a Regular Spot, Monday at midday Australian Eastern Time, whether at daylight or standard time, depending on the time of the year. That's a regular time. But I do need to say I won't be streaming this Monday. I will be doing it on Tuesday because I've got to get in a CT machine on Monday. And the following week, Holly will be back for Monday with Holly. That will be the 16th. Yes, that's all that's written up in pen on the calendar so far. There's a few in pencil, but we'll get to them. I'll let you know. Of course, you can always see what's coming up at thebirdemergency.com/live. So the Monday show next week will be on Tuesday, midday. We'll be back here for Habitat Gardening, 9:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. thebirdemergency.com/live. If you want me to look at your place or make some suggestions or solve a problem, submit at thebirdemergency.com/live. Thanks, everyone. I always like catching up with you. Saturday mornings is going to be an interesting thing. We'll see how we develop this. I hope you are getting a shovel or something in your hands today, or perhaps visiting the local garden centre or your mum and pop. Isn't that mom and pop for the Americans? Local nursery, community garden, anything. Get out there amongst it. Enjoy your plants and enjoy your birds. See you, bird nerds. Oh.